I used to use an analogy about, living at base camp. So you can live at base camp, but you can't live at the peak of Mount Everest, right? So you want to be able to set yourself up with a pretty sturdy, campsite. And for me, I think the whole concept of getting to stage 2 is about that ability to live at campsite 4, burst to the summit, peak at the top, then get back down before you kill yourself.
Hey, welcome to the Muscle Intelligence Podcast. I'm your host, Ben Pakulski. Today's guest is an incredibly successful fitness model. She's an incredibly successful online coach with literally hundreds of wins, hundreds of pro cards, hundreds of pro athletes, and all around. The reason I had decided to have this guest on is because she just is a good person. And I wanted to dig into how she manages to maintain such a successful coaching roster and a great outlook on life while she continues to push herself through trials, tribulations, and hardships like we all have. And I've had the amazing pleasure of coaching and working with Alicia Gowans for the last few months, and just really love her energy and her outlook, and I know you will too. And some of the topics we get into today are the necessity of persistence and success, and like when obstacles arise and things get hard, knowing that you can persist through anything and understanding that your obstacle is your greatest opportunity for growth. We talk about commitment. We talk about being a great human being. And she has an incredible insight into all of these aspects of ultimately not just creating a body that you love, but living your greatest life, because mindset plays a huge role in not only success in your physical body, but success in every aspect of your life, right? People chase this ideal body and believe that, hey, when I achieve my ideal body, I will be happy. But the reality is that the happiness has to precede the body. And if you can create a happy mind and a fulfilled mind, the body will just be a great byproduct. And my guest today, Alicia Gowans, and I discussed this and her hardships, her trials, and the things she still continues to go through while balancing a really, really busy schedule of being the WBFF world champion, top spokesperson, and coaching a huge roster of clients. So one of the interesting things that caught my attention about Alicia, which I'll say in the podcast, is when I first met her, she started talking about an injury she had and had this level of awareness around the reality that this injury was actually a result of her emotional state, which is a really interesting conversation that most people aren't aware of. Most physical manifestations often come as a result of some type of trauma that lives inside of you. So Alicia's awareness of that was one of the things that intrigued me to have this conversation, and the conversation was an amazing one that you're going to love. I hope you listen right to the end and enjoy this conversation with Miss Alicia Gowans. I think the easiest place for us to kick off for the audience is giving them an idea of your background.
In all honesty, a lot of the traction came for me when I had actually gone through my injury, and there was so much vulnerability around that. And I shared the whole journey, quite publicly. And there was so many people that connected into that and saw the evolution of me over that course of time, but then also that could relate to it. It's not just about the bottleneck that I had physically, it's the bottlenecks they face in everyday life. So it was that ability for me to have a voice and people to feel like they could then open up and share with me challenges they'd been facing. That was probably largely it. I was already, quite an established profile inside of the fitness industry in Australia anyway, but it just took me to a whole nother level. And I think people, witnessed me with adversity and in spite of it become incredibly successful, I said to you, I had gone through that injury, rehab myself, and, nowhere near as effectively as we are now, to 4 crowning titles. I hold the most crowns.
So that was before you got any of these
That was before I had my injury, before I got any of these wins. This is why I'm saying, this is why I've established myself as firmly as I have. And, for me, I think you'll find that most people that talk about me in a way where they feel safe. I've got a nickname as the mother hen, and it's because I look after the team, but they all know that they're quite safe with me to have conversations that are quite confronting and quite vulnerable spaces, and have the capacity to move through those without judgment.
So it's so important, right? And,
it's really
I think
important.
that's why people come to me is like, I don't judge anybody. I'm like, I've
100%.
been through way more bullshit than most people have.
100%.
Like, who am I to judge or place an opinion? Like, you'll take every opportunity to show yourself, right?
Correct.
Like, show who you really are.
Correct.
And if you're a great person, like, who are we to judge?
Exactly. And and I think, well, it's as I said to you, that's the main reason why I resonate with you straight away, is because you've got that same sort of outlook on things. And you're more progressive too, quite innovative in the way you look at stuff, and nothing is out of scope. You're open to most things, which I'm the same. Like, you have a look at my team, it doesn't look stereotypical of someone that takes, a route to stage. I'm very open about the fact that I have specialists in all these different areas that work with me in all these different spaces, because they're making me holistically the best version of myself. It's not just give me a training program, give me a food plan, and off I go. It's
That's
the
the
inner
worst
game.
thing about this industry, right?
100%
And
is.
we still deal with it. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
This reality that people have done it this way for a long time, therefore it's the right way.
Exactly.
And it's like hit myself in the head. I'm like, God, you idiots.
Or it's worked for everyone else, so it's going to work for you.
In the 80s, it worked for, whomever.
Exactly. And I think they forget that life is part of the process too, so people's emotions, people's situations, people's complexities, the layers of the onion aren't dealt with.
Yeah.
Not by traditional scopes of method. Right. And I think that's probably
so
what
all
we
my
do
audience
different.
is hearing me go down this path really consistently with the autonomic nervous system. Like, pay attention to this, pay attention to this, pay attention to this.
Correct.
Well, that's where it ties in. It's like,
Correct.
This is your way of objectively measuring your life.
Correct.
Right? Like, hey, where's your stress?
Yep.
Where's your environment? Well, this is so far our best known metric on, like,
Correct.
hey, this is actually giving you exact data on what's happening in your life. What's your perception of stress? How recovered are you? How well are you sleeping?
Yep.
Look at your HRV.
And what we often see is, the immediate response to that, if someone's showing something, is cut calories, add stuff in. But realistically, if they got out of the way, it's a case of where's the log jam? So if you think about, going back to the loggers, they'd have their logs going down the river and all of a sudden they get one jam and then backs everything up. And there's a bottleneck, right? Yeah. Does it require a massive overhaul? No, it requires that one little thing being taken out of the equation. So start asking the question, where's your log jam?
Right.
I actually set homework for my team all the time and weekly protocols where they've got to come back to me with quite reflective-based assignments. And the last one that I just did was on where's your log jam? So tell me what's the one thing that's your bottleneck at the moment.
Most people know. Well, I shouldn't say that actually. You probably run at this too. Like, so this is why I created the pillars, like the 6 pillars of a lean, healthy, muscular physique, because it's coming from one of these 6 pillars always. Yeah. So these are the 6 things that you can impact your physique with. But most people, from my experience, think it's the nutrition. And I think most people are wrong.
It's life. It's usually life. It is. And it's usually the things that impact on them and they're not even aware that it is, at a subconscious level, which we've talked about even that shows up in pain mechanisms, which, we'll get into in this podcast. But, it's the much broader stuff that goes unnoticed or unobserved quite frequently, and then they put a Band-Aid over it and expect it to go away. Well, it's not. It's a big gaping wound that's not going to heal until you shine some air and some light on it.
Do you begin to talk to your clients about the emotional stuff, or do you have people that you refer out to?
It comes to a point, and then at a point where you know that it's out of scope, then it gets referred on for sure, 100%. I've got specialists in every area that feed into my business that have specific focuses.
So someone comes to you with, Alicia, I'm having... I feel stressed, or I have anxiety, or I have depression, or I have issues with food. What are your questions? I'm very curious because I've got kind of like I don't know if I say I have a canned approach, but like,
you know what? I
just like to listen, but I love to hear
that's
what
what I was just going to say. For me, I let them really take me down the path of their own discovery. So it's got to be client-centric. I call it client-centric. And it's where it's about letting them feel comfortable enough to actually open up that line of communication. So I really open-end question them with, stuff that I guess has them starting to self-reflect. So it'll be about the things like, the standard things like sleep. What's their sleep patterns like? What's their behaviors like? What are their rituals like? Do they have any? What's work like at the moment? What's stressful at the moment? How would you qualify your stress? And then I allow them basically just to get into the conversations that start to unravel around down the rabbit hole, really, as to what's, going on for them. But it really varies. Some people you can pick up on straight away and you can tell what scope it's going to sit into and you can direct that conversation.
Totally.
But then others, it's a little, it's a little pie in the sky. It could be one of many things.
Do you think men and women are different?
Oh, definitely. But yet not, if that makes sense.
Sure, yeah.
100%. Definitely different in the way they'll convey it or hold on to it than females. And females can be totally different too. Like I've got females that sit in more masculine zones that will treat it more like, masculine state would and probably reserve it more. And then I've got those that are just emotionally out with it, and they just verbal diarrhea with it. So it really varies, but men definitely suppress it more, I find.
Totally.
And men have probably
the hard outer shell.
I was going to say men probably have the physical symptoms that show up, or the females that sit with more masculine energy have the physical symptoms that show up. So it will exacerbate and it will come out in other ways, and it will usually.
I always just ask them like, "Hey, do you want some help with that?" Like, and once you have their permission, usually it's like, "Oh, now they'll open up," right? Because guys are very, very hard to crack often because like they have to have especially in the fitness industry, you have to have this persona of like I'm a big tough guy. So the question is always like, would you like some help? Would you like would you like me to listen to you and want to talk about it? And if they say yes, then you've got an open path to at least guiding. Yeah. So one thing I've started doing with some clients lately, which I do with myself, is I schedule. It sounds kind of obscure, but I schedule joy, happiness, and fulfillment times. Yeah. So many of us in the society are attached to like, I got to crush it. I got to work hard. I have to go. I have to be a type A personality. And that's when you end up digging a big hole for yourself or digging even a trench.
There's no downtime.
Yeah. So with scheduling, like, hey, I know I'm going to work hard for 4 hours. Then I'm going to schedule joy, happiness, and fulfillment, whatever that looks like for you. So beginning client, I'll say, hey, I want you to make a list of all the things that bring you joy, happiness, and fulfillment. And then pick out the ones that are hopefully not destructive, like not food, not drugs, not like maybe sex.
The numbing agents.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Not promiscuous sex. But like all those things that actually bring you joy. And then how do we implement them intentionally so that like you have them at regular intervals and not just like shit, it's been like 3 weeks and I haven't done anything fulfilled myself.
Yeah.
Because those are the people who end up cheating on their diet. Like, I have to go and eat 30 donuts because like I've been depriving myself for so long. Because donuts is just a mechanism, I think, of bringing joy. It's a numbing agent,
that's right. It's pleasure signal,
totally.
That's right.
Your brain's looking for serotonin or dopamine. And
if you're not getting it somewhere else, then you're going to reach for that, for sure.
So I think that's an interesting approach with women is like, I don't know if you use anything like that, but implementing strategically, like, hey, every couple of days I want you to go out and go for a walk in the park or go spend some time with your kids or like whatever brings you joy.
Yeah, we do.
You have to plan it.
We do talk about that. We do talk about that a lot, and about having actual rest days where it's rest of, body, mind, and soul. Mm-hmm. So where you're actually completely letting go, where it's not focused on anything that's going to be detrimental to, a space of relaxation. So even if it's just like for some women, it's date nights, having a date night with a partner. For other women, it's taking the kids to the park. For other women, it's literally just not getting on the computer and working, for the corporate workaholics. It really varies per person, but we definitely talk about having those, I call it plugging out of the matrix.
Yeah.
Like take the blue pill.
I call it parasympathetic bits. I'm like, we talked about that. Like you're going to do yoga, you're going to go for a walk, you're going to go outside, there's no work, there's no cell phone, there's no social media, like you're off that day.
Definitely.
And what does that feel like for most people, right? I think that's recharging the batteries, filling the bucket,
For a lot of people, it's really uncomfortable at first because they've never done it. And they're like, what do you mean no social? Like they have no idea. And they actually almost hyperventilate. Some of them get anxiety at the concept of having a day completely off, where they're like, well, hang on a minute, what do you mean I don't go to the gym? Or what do you mean I don't walk? Or what do you mean there's no step count? Just calm down and sit on the couch or do whatever it is that, is actually going to down-regulate or turn the volume down on what you're doing at the moment, because we don't have to have the volume turned up full ball every single day of the week. We want to moderate the level of the volume on different days in order to be able to make sure that you come out of this with everything intact.
Right. Or if you're going to push the volume up, you better be able to turn it way down.
Yeah. Sturdy, campsite at campsite 4 and live there, which is still not too healthy.
In my mind, I just heard like thousands of men out there going, fuck that, I can live it. Like, I can do it. Of course. Yeah, right.
And then you get all the ones that are historically dying at the summit.
Exactly, right?
And for me, I think the whole concept of getting to stage 2 is about that ability to live at campsite 4, burst to the summit, peak at the top, then get back down before you kill yourself.
Celebrate that shit when
exactly
you're done.
Right.
Yeah, that's a big thing that's missing too, right? Is like acknowledge yourself for your victories, for your rewards. And I've had times in my life where I was just, ascending the proverbial mountain, and I did take time to go, hell yeah, like I crushed this today. And there was times where I didn't, and I think looking back on it, when I didn't, things maybe stopped going as well. I think you really need to acknowledge, because then it allows you to push further.
That's right. And it's also, I think, and we were talking about this in the session today, acknowledging to the areas for growth. So acknowledging when something's not at its best and could be further developed, and then focusing on that in a positive way, because I find that then also gives you this humility of accepting where you're at and knowing that you've still got progress to make. And then you learn to celebrate the wins, but they're in a different way. They're the wins of development that come internal and external. And it's just it's not always about the podium finish. It's not always about the lights and the medals and the prize money or whatever the hell else it is you're chasing. It becomes about the internal peace, the internal happiness, the internal level of celebration for something that you've just overcome that you didn't even think you could do because you pushed your own limits or boundaries. For me, that has been imperative in my journey.
That, because how do you start to convince someone in this fitness industry who's after this completely external validation, that this ego-driven vanity of it, how do you start to, because I talk about this, but I'd love to discuss with you, like, how do you change that focus from being, hey, you need to go win that contest, to, hey, it doesn't matter what happens at that contest. Yeah. It's a $7 trophy.
We've already won, in a sense. And we've had this conversation, oh my God, I have it almost every season with at least 3 or 4 girls that I know can win the show, but where it's about getting them to tap into the fact they've already won on so many other levels.
Right.
I've got an athlete at the moment who's a prime example of this, and she's coming into her first ever stage, and she has really significant PCOS to the point where, as you know, getting lean for a woman with PCOS is incredibly difficult. And
polycystic ovaries.
Yeah, exactly. And her starting point was, at no point anywhere even near competition starting point, right? So we've been working together for well over a year, and the battle wasn't with the physique, even though that's a battle. The battle's in the inner game with her, and it's all been mental. And so, our whole conversations have constantly been about the fact that this is the best she's ever looked. This is the best she's ever felt. And this is something she thought she'd never be able to do. So stop beating yourself up about all the things you think you're not 100% on yet.
For listeners that don't know, PCOS is associated with increased androgen levels. It's also associated with increased weight gain due to insulin resistance.
Yep.
So dealing with that, I've dealt with some clients with that. It's a huge obstacle.
It is. And it's a real mental, deal for them too, because they're looking at their peers or their, in her situation, her teammates even, and kind of going, well, why am I not at that point? Or why does mine look different? Or even to the point where, okay, we're doing check-ins, and you'll appreciate this, because of where they sit with their profile, they'll gain in places in certain stages of prep where other people are losing. And it's not a bad thing. It'll be actually that they're actually gaining lean mass. But for her, that was a mental thing too. So it's constant conversations to overcome the mental barriers as to the fact that, she feels it's that comparison, evil that comes out in this journey that we're on to stage for a lot of us, where they're comparing themselves to their peers. And so she was doing that. And so it was constantly about that whole process of bringing her back into understanding and celebrating this progress, this idea of progress, not perfection. And that this is, the cool part is knowing that this is her new starting point. Like post this stage, it's a whole nother ball game, because if that's the new starting point and you know how far you've come, to put it, in blanket terms, she's lost like 15 kilos. So it's huge. So it's a big deal. What she's going to look like on stage is phenomenal. Is she going to be able to win her first show? No, but we've already had that conversation too. She's going to definitely make people notice her, and she's going to command attention, and she's come, beyond her own expectations and beyond mine even, she's superseded them. So it is. It's I think very important, and it's very hard, and it's constant conversations. As a coach, you're constantly trying to bring them back into that point of celebrating the wins all the way through, and that it's a marathon, not a sprint, and it's the journey, not the destination that you want to focus on.
Everybody wants to win today.
Oh my God, I know.
There's something to talk about there, though. Like, you're talking about this idea of, how do you overcome PCOS? And ultimately, I think step one is a psychological acceptance of what it is, decreasing, therefore, the perceived stress.
Correct.
Decreasing then the cortisol, decreasing the inflammation that's going to be a result of your brain state, and then allowing your body to actually do what it's meant to do. And I think there's massive lessons to be learned. And I'm actually still learning this lesson now. And like the terminology you use and the acceptance of the life around you, and not necessarily like I have to change, but like, hey, this is what it is. Now, how do I continue to grow from here? It's not like, trying to put these things behind you or disregard that they're there.
Exactly. And it's just that my journey is going to look different to someone else's, and accepting that, and no two journeys look the same anyway. I mean, even from stage to stage for the same person, it doesn't look the same. So, you definitely can't fall into that comparison trap. And I think that, each individual physique has individual variables that make them so unique. So, you just can't do that. And you've got to fall in love with the process of understanding more about yourself too. So I think there's power that comes with that. And I think her journey, she's at a point now where she's a totally different person, and her journey now is much more about self-acceptance and self-love and self-growth, and the power of her own knowledge now around what works for her and what doesn't.
And just visually in my mind, it's like she has a bigger mountain to climb, but when she gets to the top, she also has a better vista, right?
We
she also
talked
has
about
a better
that.
view.
Yeah, like the valley might have its peaks, have its troughs, but the peak is going to be bright and it's going to be worth it. And so she definitely feels that now. But that's another prime example of someone that I think it's those little situations like that where you've got to go. Don't forget how far you've come just because you feel like you're not there yet, and don't feel like any part of the journey is not worth the work you've put in already, because it is. It's one step. It's one chapter, basically. There's more chapters to come. Yeah. So, look, and I talk about it all the time with my team, because it took me from when I first went pro to when I won my first pro show, which was post my injury. That was 2.5, 3 years. 3 years, and then post an injury. So it doesn't happen overnight,
Yeah, I always say, our greatest obstacle is our greatest opportunity for growth. Right. And most people look at obstacles like, oh, no, I can't do it. And you don't have to look at the time. I was actually talking to my son about this yesterday. This morning, we're doing homeschooling, and in one of his books, there's this massive staircase in the picture. So you could barely see the top of the staircase. And the lesson in the staircase is like, well, don't look at the top, right?
One step at a time.
Because you can't get to the top of that staircase. The only thing you can do is get to the next step. And that's trying hopefully teaching my son that at 7 years old will be a massive lesson. But if you can just take one step, we can all take one step, right?
Absolutely.
One day after another.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Hey, I interrupt this podcast to bring you a special message from Joovv. So you guys know I've been using an infrared light device for probably a couple years now with incredible success. And I've had Dr. Anthony J on the podcast. I've also had the owners and creators of Joovv on the podcast to talk a lot about this. This is one of the biohacking modalities that I'm most interested in, that has the most validated scientific data behind it. So Dr. Anthony J is literally doing independent data at the Mayo Clinic on an ongoing basis to see what are the implications, positive and negative, of infrared light exposure. And what Dr. J finds is that 10 minutes of light exposure a day, really close to your skin, front and back. If you can't get outside in the sunshine, which I know a lot of us can't because of time, because of where we are in the world, then a Joovv light is an incredible way to impact your biology in a positive way. So some of the things that you're going to experience when you use a Joovv light, or you just get outside for 15 to 30 minutes of sunlight on your skin in the morning, ideally, obviously, naked body or very close to it, increase collagen synthesis, so helping our joints, helping our tendons and our ligaments. That's a huge implication. So one of the things that Dr. Gerald Pollack talked about when he was on the podcast was this idea of infrared potentially increasing structured water. And structured water, as we know, is as necessary in the maintenance of health over long term. You're also going to notice increased energy production, increased nitric oxide. So if you want to improve your pump pre-workout, I like to use my Joovv for about 10 minutes before I train, and I'll do it really, really close to my body. So chest right against it, face basically right against it, maybe a centimeter away, and then I'll spin around and do 10 minutes or so on the backside as well. So shining it on my bald head and my back. And I've actually noticed a tremendous boost in just the way I feel pre-workout. The aches and pains are gone. My pumps are increased. And another side benefit is going to improve your hormone ratio. So some significant research on increasing testosterone. So super cool. You guys can head over to Juve, use the code BPAC, and support the podcast and support Juve just because you want to feel great, feel awesome, and biohack your way through feeling good all the time. Enjoy the rest of the podcast with Alicia Gowans. So that leads us perfectly into the thing I want to talk about with you with your injury, right? So realizing that it seems as though from the outside, knowing you the short time that I have, that this injury has actually, you've managed to turn something that probably was debilitating to you and would have been to anybody else, probably destroyed a career or at least stopped the career.
Yep.
And now you've turned it into something that you're like, no, I'm so much better. Like I'm surrounding myself with great people. I'm sharpening 100%. My sword. And I've learned to, I think most importantly here, pay attention to what's going on inside my mind.
Yeah, definitely. So
tell us about your injury.
Well, okay. It was about 6 weeks after the 2015 pro show. So it was the World Championships in Vegas, and we got home, and Christos always gives me so much grief about this, and his running line is, I should have played basketball that day. That was what he said to me when it all went down, and they're carrying me through this gymnasium and I couldn't walk, and oh my God, I'm screaming. And he just looked at me, and the first thing he says, because he's always cracking jokes, you know what he's like. So trying to break the pain for me, he's like, I told you should have played ball. And I'm like, oh my God, not now. Like of all the times where you're going to crack jokes, now's not the time. And so yes, that day I was faced with two choices. I could have played ball with the boys because Nick and everyone was home. So it was like this big, sausage fest on a ball court. And I was like, no, thanks. I'm just going to go do my squats. So I went into it's this big gymnasium where they had their basketball courts. And then there was this really elite level gym that's part of it. It's for, advanced youth. So I went in and trained in there, and it felt good. Like, this is the thing. These things come up, and I say this to my team all the time. Nothing happens without rhyme or reason, and the universe gives us sometimes exactly what we need at that point in time, and I'm a big believer of this. And anyone that's heard me talk either on the Competitive Edge podcast or in any context, been to any of my workshops or seminars, they'll hear me talk about my injury as a blessing, not as a curse, and it 100% was. Like, I don't regret a thing about it. Even when I, like yesterday, was talking to you about sometimes you get those moments of frustration. They're nothing compared to what would have been my life if I hadn't had the injury, because the injury has perpetually changed the course of my entire career and my life. The question I
turn it into is, what do I need to learn from this, right?
Yeah,
when
exactly.
I feel like I'm stressed or struggling, what do I need to learn?
Yeah, correct. So that day in the gymnasium, I had warmed up. I felt great. I'd done all my primers. Like, nothing felt out of the ordinary for me. And, like I was at a point where I was coming out of the show, so I was increasing my strength, and I had a warm-up set on. It was only 60 kilos, nothing, like I was doing 120 at the time. So that was nothing for me. I'd literally gotten into my third rep in my warm-up set, and at the bottom range, my adductor pulled tight in my right leg, my hip rotated forward, my piriformis locked on in the back of my left, and my hip rotated back, and then you could just hear the crack across the gym. And that was it. Barbell on the ground, I'm on the ground, I couldn't move. It took me a couple of seconds, I was in, and then the pain hit me, and I had a girlfriend that was spotting me, and she's just dropped everything and gone, are you okay? And I'm laying on the floor. No, I'm actually really not. Like, she goes, I heard that. And I went, yep. And then I just started crying. I couldn't walk. I couldn't move. I was in a brace. I was in traction in a brace. Like, they said I'd probably need surgery, that I would never lift again. And, it took me 12 months to sort of come back out of it. And it all went down at a time where we were actually just opening our gym 6 weeks out from opening the gym. So I'm walking around the gym in a brace, like every hour on the ground, doing my stretches and my release work. And it was excruciating. But the good part about it was that I had so many people that were around me and that were witnessing it, that I didn't for one second feel like I couldn't hide it, and I didn't run from it. I sat in it instead of, choosing to run from it. I chose to try to find the lessons in every single second of it.
I would have ran from it.
I struggled.
You're a better person than me. Tell me what the pop was so the listeners know.
So pars, fractures, L4, L5, bilateral bulging disc from L4 down to S1.
And you had no previous back
I had a
conditions?
slight hair fracture in my L5 because I had hyperflexibility. I was a prima donna ballerina. I told you this before. I went into bodybuilding. I was in ballet. So did ballet. And anyway, I actually had an issue with my back that took me out of dance, so no longer dancing. And that's what got me into bodybuilding and got me into rehabilitation, falling in love with, making my body strong and working on dysfunction, funnily enough. So this is going back sort of, 12, 15 years ago. And so fell in love with that process and built this strong physique and obviously kept building on it. But then as we talked about on the floor, you get to that point where you ignore the little things that come up day to day, right?
No.
And you go, oh, that feels a bit sore. Oh, I'm just going to train around that. I'm good. We got this. Or you go, that's a little sore. Nah, it's fine. Just keep pushing through it.
Man up.
Yeah, right. And that's what I did. And so I got into the situation where I overtrained my lower half. That's why the adductor went, because I actually had a tendon tear in my elbow that was the size of a 20-cent coin that took my upper body out for the 6 to 9 months prior. So overtraining the lower half, and that's how the back ended up, obviously. So structural dysfunction. And just not being aware of it, you know what I mean? Like, I was so out of tune with my body, right. And I know this now. Like, that was the universe giving me a slap up the side of the face and going, get the hell back inside your shit and sort it out, because you are
using training to disconnect from your body rather than connect.
100%. And I was
big lesson, listeners.
I was also using the training as, an ability to run, I think, from stuff that was going on in life that I wasn't, I just wasn't bold enough to kind of probably grab by the balls and change.
Sure.
And so,
it made you feel good as a state change temporarily.
Absolutely. And it was one of those situations where, you felt like you had control over that, whereas, other things you might not have necessarily been so consciously in control of. So for me, those were all the things that I now can, in hindsight, look back on and go, wow, okay, that was the domino effect that went boom.
It's funny because now that I look at it from the outside, like most people think when they exercise, they're doing something good for themselves, right? Yeah. And in some levels you are.
It is, but at the same time.
At the same time, most of the time it's like, hey man,
mechanical.
It's how I'm disconnecting from these pains and these emotions that I just don't want to deal with right now. Yeah. Rather than like sitting with them and embracing them and finding out what the hell it is, realizing like, hey, you're supposed to fix that, dum-dum.
Yeah, exactly.
You're masking it. I'm speaking
the path of least resistance, and I posted about this just yesterday. The path of least resistance, which is basically living, life of flow, which is flowing with the resistance or the pull of life, not going against it, meeting it with more resistance, which is what we all, essentially do. We all don't want to change the things that are hard to change, and we also don't want to challenge the things that are, difficult. So we all tend to do this, and that's what it taught me. Realistically, that's what my back injury taught me, was the whole process of having to learn how to flow with the resistance of life, but also how to deal with it as we go through it, because we all have it. We'll have challenges, we'll have resistance, we all have things that go on that, aren't comfortable, and it's sitting inside the discomfort that, makes it, the whole thing happen.
Sitting inside the discomfort.
Which, what do you do? You're sitting there with a brace on your back. You can't lift, you can't move. You're being told, and the worst part was,
how long were you in it?
6 months. Yeah, another 3 months intermittently. So then as I would have, obviously issues, it would be like that. I couldn't dress myself. I couldn't even shower. Like, Christos was putting my shoes and socks on. I'm not even kidding you. I shit you not. We had this conversation when I first met you. I had literally 9 days prior had my last cortisone injection into my back, and I hobbled downstairs to greet you at the hotel lobby, trying my best to make it look like I could walk straight.
So I got to tell you, I don't know how long it's been, but you look like a different human being.
100% I am.
You really do.
Thank you and Jordan for having a massive part to play in that. But you're right, I do.
Giving you credit, like I want you to be acknowledged for that.
Thank you.
Like, that takes a lot, and you've come so far, and your daily diligence is admirable and commendable. It's incredible. Not only your movement, but your energy and your vibrance is different. So take acknowledgement for that and acknowledge yourself.
Yeah.
Because you're making huge progress. And like,
thank you. That means a lot. And it does because, and we had this conversation, like, I always felt like I'd been doing pretty good. You know what I mean? Like I had gone, for the listeners, post that back injury, I had gone to the point where when I rehabilitated back to my first stage, so my comeback show, which was the Atlantic City Pro-Am in December 2016, which I won, I only lifted for the last 6 weeks of that prep. And it was with blood flow restriction training because I could not load properly and I was prone positioned only, no bent over movements. You saw what my thoracic was like. Oh, my Lord.
Yeah, thoracic.
And I rehabilitated through that process with the blood flow restriction through to that stage to my first win, then rehabilitated again around no deads, no squats to the LA win, then again through to the UK 2017 world title. And then again last year to, retain and reign with my current second world title. So this year's pursuit is to retain my third title with better movement.
I didn't know all this stuff. What were you doing to train?
Oh my Lord. Okay. So realistically, listening to my body
and wiggling your nose or what?
Listening to my body way more than I ever did. So much more intuitive. This is why I say to you, I don't regret my injury at all. It made me a better athlete, a better partner, a better coach, a better woman, like in total, because it taught me how to sit inside of the discomfort. It taught me how to challenge patience and tolerance and self-acceptance. I learnt compassion and empathy with myself and therefore then with others to a level that I can't even describe. It's profound.
Give me a tutorial.
It's profound.
Yeah, the idea of compassion for yourself is something that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
But I haven't yet figured that one out.
I will say it's a consistent work in process, like it's eternal. And I'm constantly practicing it daily. And there will be things where I catch myself being a bit harsh or a bit critical. I'm like, hang on a minute. Look what you've done. You're okay. We got this. Let's keep moving. Be a bit kinder to yourself,
Right, but probably like yourself, I also don't feel like I've done anything. I'm like,
I know what you mean.
I've got so much I have to do.
Yeah,
or so much wrong choice of words. So much I want to do.
Yeah, like
and even as a bodybuilder.
The tip of the iceberg. So it's like the thing that sunk the Titanic, right? You've only just seen the tip. There's all this other stuff underneath that's yet to come. I know. I totally get it. And therefore,
so
you kind of go
rest on that.
I know, and that's why I think I don't. So when you say. Yeah. Kudos to me for what I've done. The reason I think I keep doing it, when I always get people inbox me and go, that they're inspired by me, I look at it and I'm like, I'm humble and grateful for that. But at the same time, I'm like, this would be the minimum I expect.
All I acknowledge you for is the daily diligence and discipline, because that is the victory, right?
Yes, correct.
Like the end result where you are now, I think you're only seeing the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, correct.
But the fact that you're so diligent with doing that stuff that most people aren't willing to do to succeed.
And I think I am, because I know there's so much more to come. It's like you just said. It's like you look at it and you go, okay, I've done all these great things, but it's still nothing. Like where I want to go and the things I want to do and the voice I want to have, in the industry it's a whisper at the moment compared to where I want it to be. Right. So to get that belly rolling, vocal that I want it to end up to be, there's still a lot of work to do. So the day-to-day stuff has to be done.
So when I first met you, you said something that surprised me and made me like you right away. And I told you this a few minutes ago. Like,
I'm so likable though. Come on, man.
Well, you're likable, but many people are likable.
I know what you mean.
I was so aware of your level of awareness that I was like, wow, that's impressive. Just when I met you, you talked about how this injury was in many ways caused by your emotional trauma or your emotional baggage that you were carrying around. Talk to me about that, because that was a huge awareness for you, and when you said that to me.
It really was for me too, I'd spent 2 years working around it structurally. So I thought, you and Jordan have expanded that yet again, but I was working around it structurally, right? And I kept thinking, God, I'm doing everything right. Why does this keep coming back? Why does this keep coming back? And it was when I was on a plane flight. So we're about to go to the LA Pro-Am after I leave you. And it was this time last year, almost exactly, that we're on a plane flight home. I had bronchitis and I coughed and popped my 5th bilateral bulging disc straight in my nerve root, an inch in, and I couldn't walk properly. 17 weeks from stage, and I was literally taking legs out from under me, right? And it was in that point in time where I'm like, why? I got frustrated with the universe. I'm like, I'm learning stuff. Like, what else do I have to learn? Come on. Haven't I paid enough already? And then I thought, no, okay, all right, I'm missing something. So I'm sitting in the airport to come home from LA at like red eye, like 11 o'clock at night, semi in tears because I'm in that much freaking pain. And anyway, I'm Google searching, as you do, because Dr. Google eventually becomes the go-to for everyone, even me. And I came across this app called Curable. And I went, why the fuck not? I've tried everything else. I'm going to give this a go. So I downloaded it. And I was mind blown. In the first 20 minutes of listening to it, I'm like, ugh, penny dropped. Shit, there's stuff here. There's stuff here. And it's in here. And well, how have I missed this? I'm so smart on so many levels, and yet I've been so dumb on this one. And it went to the science of pain and how chronic pain is felt in the body psychosomatically. And structurally, there might not be anything currently wrong with me.
There. That's the current research. There's literally nothing there.
The disc itself does not cause pain. This was the most profound moment for me on that plane flight as I'm listening to this app the whole 17 hours home. I'm like, oh my God, how did I miss this? It seems so profoundly simple yet common sense, and I've missed it for 2.5 years. I'm stupid, but the more you know, the dumber you feel, right?
You don't know what you don't know, right?
So you're exactly right.
Yeah.
So then I started going, okay, all right, oh my God, I'm going to have to sit in this vulnerability thing. Jesus. So that's what I started to do. I started to work on what is it? I started to break and rewire and work through the patterns of movement where the anchors were sitting to old patterns of movement, so that if I just did something, so I told you when I first met you, I couldn't cough or sneeze without blowing a disc. Like it would happen every single time. The first thing I started to do was change my language. So I no longer used words like broken or blown or pain. I took pain out of it. So anyone following me or listening to my stories has heard me refer to banana. So instead of having chronic pain every day, I would talk about peeling my banana every day, and I'd make it fun. And then we'd start having these, fun, joking-based conversations that took me out of the chronic heightened state with the volume up and what I call the constant fire alarm. So for anyone that's never had chronic pain or doesn't know anyone that's had chronic pain, it's really hard for you to understand how detrimental it can be to a person. But for 3 straight years, every day I woke up, I was living inside of a house where a fire alarm was never turned off. So that's how I would describe it. It's like the fire alarm went off.
That's actually what's happening in your nervous system, right?
That day in the gym, when that barbell went off my back, a fire alarm went off, and it never turned off. Imagine how irritated you are. Your brain's just constantly running. My nervous system was like screaming at me every single day, and that's what a lot of the problem was it was these little movements, and it was these little motions and these little things that, so from a point of view of movement or exacerbation or from a structural point of view, that were the things that kept setting me off. But then I had to go deeper than that. So I started off with word association. I changed that. Then I started off with changing, so fun games that would take the mind off the banana. So I did that. Then it came into the things that put me into parasympathetic input. So I started doing those. There were little activities, little rituals that I was doing every single day. I increased my meditation. I increased my, my positive self-talk. I looked at things that took me out of the building when the alarm was at its highest point. So I did coloration and colored in with crayons. Like I did everything you can imagine. So took the brain out of and started to self-soothe. So I taught myself how to self-soothe. And then after that, I started looking at the deeper stuff. So that's when I started journaling. That's when I started looking at, okay, what's really going on? What's attached to this at this level that's being set off by a movement like a sneeze, which should not be making me feel like this, like I can't walk. And it was then starting to just deal with some unresolved stuff, and funnily enough, and I've talked to you about this and talked about this on my own podcast, I had done a lot of this stuff, and I'd worked with a Tibetan Buddhist monk for 3 years. So I did a whole bunch of self-development and self-awareness and transcendence-based work on an internal compass point of view many years ago, but it was more recent stuff that I just finally, moved forward from that I hadn't dealt with, that I then had to go through the process of dealing with. And that's what the back was about. The back is attached to the past. Funny irony, right? And then the leg was attached to moving forward. So what is it about moving forward that was worrying me so much that it was pulling me up every day? And it was because I hadn't closed the door on the past. So I had to get really deep and dirty on some of those things, And I've got no issue with talking about it. I had no issue with talking to you about it because that's actually part of the process, is actually getting quite vulnerable enough
well,
to.
you can't have a negative emotional attachment
No,
with
you
it
can't.
and let
You
it go.
can't.
You have to just, it is what it is.
I don't, because as I said to you, like oh my God, it makes you a better person. Like, you just move to this point where, you know, the little things in life don't matter. You know, you don't sweat the small stuff. I definitely don't anymore. And I don't hold on to other people's opinions of me. I really could give two rat's ass what anyone thinks of me. You know, they're either like me or they don't. And you don't have to be everyone's cup of tea, because some people are coffee drinkers like me. And that's fine too. So I think when I moved beyond all of that as well, it's liberating. It's completely empowering, and it completely shifts you. You know, like, I've always been a positive, an annoying optimist, ridiculously annoying optimist. So positivity was never an issue. Even in the peak of my banana, most people would never have even known that I was in that chronic state. Like, most people didn't until I started to really talk about it. But a lot of my healing was the fact that I needed to talk about it more. So sharing my journey and sharing that was part of that process, you know, and just really being quite open, which I had never done before. Because and we've talked about this before, where you talk about you almost armor yourself to a degree, because there's fear of not being humble in a situation as well. So you also don't want to put yourself out there too much. But then there's also, you know, that whole, okay, you put yourself out there and then someone's going to just tear it down as well. And I think that's what most people face. And they layer up like an onion with all these layers of armor, and then just don't know how to disengage it, right? And I think the process of my injury was, it just took all my layers away, you know, and what you see is what you get with me 100%. And it makes you come from a place of empathy and compassion in the conversations you have. It makes you able to deal with the resistance and the pull in everyday life. And it makes you, the biggest lesson for me is I'm responsive, not reactive. Always. I can take myself out of a situation if I feel like I'm not going to be responsive before I react, which that wasn't the old me.
Of course.
At all.
And that may be the greatest superpower, right?
Yeah,
and I keep telling
correct.
everybody you got to meditate, even if it's 10 minutes, because that's just giving you this opportunity, even with the itch, right? The itch that happens on your arm or when you're meditating, like, are you going to react to it? Or are you just going to be like, oh, I realize it's just a manifestation of the nervous system? And I love that you went down the psychosomatic route, because, you know, most people live in their head and they're constantly thinking things. People in the fitness industry often get attached to the physical world. They get attached to their body. And there's this beautiful synergy, this integration that exists between the two. And you need to learn how to kind of just be aware and realize that your emotions are playing a massive role in all of these physical manifestations, from your posture to your muscle tone to your internal stress and your sleep and all these things that are physical manifestations of an emotional reality.
So true. Yeah. So true. And I think too, your ability to deal with more pressure is greater when you actually have that internal control, because you come from this place of your cup is more you notice when the cup is half full and you allow stuff to fill it, and then you notice when the cup is full enough to give to others. And I think that's the sweet spot, because before I would just be draining from a cup that was in the negative all the time and just wondering where the resources were coming from all the time. Whereas now I feel like, I don't know, it's like an abundance of energy as a result of it. It's just free flowing. It's like I said to you today on the floor, it's effortless. Life becomes effortless once you remove the log jams that we talked about. You know, so for me, there was just a couple of little emotional things. It wasn't a major overhaul like I'd done years ago with the monk. It was a log jam that had come along and stopped me from moving forward, like my calf was. It just didn't want me to take that next step until I dealt with the crap that I had to deal with from before. And you know, look, I think a lot of things have happened in the last 6 months that have further enhanced my ability to move forward. And it's all really positive stuff. And once you can start closing chapters on the stuff that you feel has or is holding you back, and you forgive yourself for the things you felt guilty for, that you should have done better, or that, you know, you had a part to play in something that you feel, you know, accountable for. Once you forgive yourself, then everything happens the way that it should. You know?
How did you create the practice of responding rather than reacting?
You know what? I think I became more aware. I became more aware of myself, and I became more aware of my energy and the impact my energy has on others, and in certain situations, the impact that has on an outcome too. So if I felt for any second that my energy was low, I just removed myself because I didn't want to bring anyone else down, because everyone seems to really vibrate off my stuff. So, and I've noticed that heavily inside my team. The team really resonate and vibe off me. So I present my best version of myself always by just making sure that I'm constantly in check with myself. So I'm constantly topping the tank back up. I'm constantly meditating and bringing myself back in line. I'm constantly, checking back in with my values and checking back in with what I'm doing is on my compass path, and making sure that, conversations I'm having are in good conscience, client-centric, and there's no, hidden agenda on my end. All those little things that I do, that I think, 100% has the outcomes that we need. But they're the little things that I would start to do to make those changes,
So my team here says that I have FBI interrogation skills. So I think you have this ability to read people.
It's an innate energy reading.
Yeah, you have this ability to read people, and I'll give you an amazing compliment that I don't often give is you're so consistent. So it shows to me how true you are, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people fluctuate and they go in and out, and I'm always I'm not going to judge you. I don't care how you are, because it doesn't affect me. But you're so consistent. Truthfully, using my interrogation skills that are just always there.
FBI Ben.
Yeah, it's just always there. You're like, oh, I see what you're doing there. But not saying that because you're here. It's so consistent in all these different scenarios.
In being anything but yourself all the time,
But it's not a point. It's an unconscious thing, right?
Yeah, true.
Being conscious of it is one thing, but you can't be conscious of it in all the different scenarios we've been in. So,
and that's very true. Yeah, because you see me forcing kids to eat Vegemite for $20 bets, and sorry, Jared.
Bribing my children.
Sorry, Jared. Bribing your kids with lots of love and affection, taking them to yogaology. Yeah. But you're right. I think,
But I see now why you have such a successful team and such a massive team of followers.
Yeah.
People see that, and I see that, right? And that's why you will always be successful in this, because people aspire to that, unconsciously or consciously, right? People are like, oh, I want this abundant energy. I want this consistency. I want this constant positive outlook on life, this constant radiance. That's what people strive to, and that's why you're doing such a great job leading all these women to their physical journey, or through their physical journeys, to transcend the mental and the physical
which is
aspects.
largely usually what we talk about, the inner game before the outer game. So, a lot of the work that I do with the team is working out the inner game strategy first. So we do a lot of identification as to, okay, where are the log jams? Mm-hmm. What are the things that are holding you back? Where are...
Can you talk to me about what some of those are?
Look, it varies. So I set homework every single week, which I talked to you about. Where
everyone on the team?
Yeah, everyone in the team. Yeah, they all get given a homework assignment, and quite often it will come about fluidly through a conversation that I've had with one. Now, I tell you now, if one's dealing with something, they all are. Yeah. So I use that as my temperature gauge, take the temperature really, and then set the tone for the homework, which is a reflection point. And you can only ever work on one thing at a time. So I believe that that's a really, big key to take home when you're going to be making change, whether it's internal, whether it's spiritual, whether it's physical. Work on one thing at a time, nail it, and then move on. So one actionable item per, development phase, if you will. And so each week we sort of set the tone. Usually they'll feed into, and they're relative to...
Give me an example of the most recent homework.
Which was the log jam, but the one before that was superpower. So they had to identify the superpower, and the superpower was going to be So the superpower was going to be the thing that, when they stood on stage, was going to make them have won. And winning doesn't necessarily mean winning the title. It means have won. Stepped on stage, confidence, 100% comfortable with their journey, know that they've given 100% of themselves, know they've overcome demons to get there and what that looks like, because that, I think... For a lot of them, it'll be, emotional stuff. So it'll be the more of the psychosomatic stuff that we talked about. It'll be
I'm responsive rather than reactive. Yeah,
it'll be
I'm always aware of who I am.
Correct. And so for some of them, it was really great. It was a great exercise because a lot of them were really empowered by it. So the theme of our next team shoot coming up in LA, superhero theme, as a result of this process, because everyone got right into it. So they came up with some great names, and they were giving themselves. They got really creative. So I'm also really big on linking in the creative brain with logical brain, because that's how then you get flow. ego.
Yeah.
So you've got to, playful states are important. So I'm really big on sleep playfulness. So you got to tap into your inner kid, and you got to do it frequently. Otherwise you lose sight of, it gives you perspective in life. You lose sight of what's important, right? Mm-hmm. And I guess the playful zone inside of you is what keeps you in check with your emotions and allows you to express yourself in a really healthy way. And I think repression of emotion is what leads us down the garden path of pain and suffering. So a lot of what we did with this exercise was to get playfulness out, get people having fun with it, and then, really tapping into what they want to be, what they aspire to be, what they want their character to be. Because when we step on that stage, we take an alter ego. We're taking our best self, but it's the version of ourselves we want everyone in the audience to believe we are.
Right.
So don't just create it, become it.
Create that before you step out there.
So that was what we started the
it.
journey of, was visualization is a really big thing for me. I do it daily. I do it daily on what I'm going to do for the day, how I'm going to see something play out, my healing. I visualize my healing every day. Mm-hmm. In my last
Joe Dispenza.
Yep, in my last win, I think I told you this, I did not practice my posing until midnight the night before my show because my lumbar rotation wouldn't do it for me. But for 16 weeks, I shit you not, Ben, I visualized my routine every single night and every single morning when I went to bed. And when I woke up, it was the first thing I did. I laid in bed and I meditated on my posing routine, and it was flawless. Mm-hmm. And I won again with my limitations, rubbing CBD oil cream all into my back and my bloody calf so I could keep going, getting physioed in between my morning show and my evening show just so I could stay on stage, having not posed at all until the night before. So visualization is a really big thing, and I'm really, really keen advocate of it because it brings, our attention toward the positive of what we want to create, and it sets the intention for where we're going. And then you marry it up with your actions. So the superpower, process and exercise was them starting to identify the things in themselves, but then also, identifying their strengths, their innate, strengths that they're not giving attention to because they're so critical and so constantly focused on the negatives and the lesson and the lack of, rather than the embodiment of what they're great at, and fostering, focus on developing that and stepping into that person and becoming that person and bringing that superhero to life, because we should all be our own freaking superhero, like as far as I'm concerned, we should all have a cape and great tights and some sort of freaking invincible superpower.
Or orange and
like I'm wearing like I'm wearing now. Great tights.
So what's next in your life after you win the World Championships in 20 weeks?
Oh, look, we've talked about this too, like lots of different things.
Are you going to keep competing, or are you going to focus on growing your
I'm going to keep competing for as long as that makes sense and as long as I'm feeling it in my heart, and I think you can relate to that. There comes a time where you've been given permission to stand down, and I'm going to keep going until it's no longer what my heart wants. So we'll see how long that is. And I want to keep winning until I decide to give up.
Sure.
I want to go out on a high. But I just want to keep getting better. I just want to keep getting better as a human. I want to keep getting better as an athlete. I want to keep getting better as a coach, as a partner, as a mother, as everything, like that's what I want for my life. And I don't ever want to stop doing that. And I don't think that that's something that's an attainable end goal. I think it's an eternal work in progress, and you're constantly striving for it. And I think, having the courage to sit in vulnerability is what gets you there. And I truly believe that continued learning and continued personal development, and this should be a sport about personal development, not about aesthetics. The aesthetics should come as a byproduct of growing oneself, and that should be inner game to the outer game.
You're speaking my language, sister. You know that.
And then I think that, from there, the aesthetic takes care of itself. It really does. And therefore, the journey is an eternal work in progress, because we're always going to evolve. And you just go from one level to the next, and you just keep getting better and better, and there's more to learn. And, for me personally, in my space, in my field as a coach, there's more to learn. And I'm working with Sports Nutrition Organisation Australia. I'm doing my master's pathway through them at the moment, and we'll be doing some competition preparation workshops with them that we're rolling out, I think, in June. I could be wrong on that. And for me, it's about continuing my knowledge in the space. It's about getting more platforms of opportunity for people to continue their knowledge. It's about providing education. It's about providing, lateral thinking to a very narrow focused sport, historically. And we've talked about this, it's a very one track. And I think there are so many more peripherals to that. There are so many more layers. It's an onion, right? And human beings are not just human beings are not just dumbbells and food. There's so much more to our anatomy.
What do you mean?
You know what I mean?
Come on.
As much as we think as we do in this sport, this is about lifting big things and eating all the foods. It's not really. And I think the more education we can get on that, which is why I love your work and why, I just gravitated towards you. I mean, you were my favorite bodybuilder for a decade anyway.
That means much, but thanks.
But I've loved your work more since you've gotten so much more into the profound lateral stuff, which I love, because it's definitely more about how I think, and it's definitely more about how I move through life. And I think it's more rewarding to see life that way, more than just the prescriptive, here's your plan, here's your food plan. It's not like that.
Because it doesn't matter. Because
No, it doesn't.
everyone thinks it's going to change who they are, but it's not. It's not.
And it's I challenge my team all the time when they're like, if I don't win though, if I don't get my pro stats, okay, all right, you don't get that little piece of paper. What's that going to do in your life?
$7
How's it going to
trophy?
change
I'll
your life?
buy you one if you like.
You know what I mean?
$7 medal.
And then say you get it, Ben.
Right.
What are you going to go do with it?
Right.
Is that going to quantifiably change your inner peace and happiness in your life right now, tomorrow? If it is,
Right.
then we need a lot more work on your inner game, because your inner game is
Well, it's going to make other people think I'm really cool, and
like, there's so much more to life than that. And
Right.
and I think when you come from a place of the inner game is strong, you're hard to beat on the outer game.
Totally.
You're a hard person to beat, and that's
Yeah.
how I feel
Because
about.
motivation just flows.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just easy.
And that's why, I've had people ask me, even last year, was I nervous about coming in for the reigning title given the limitations I had? And I'm like, you know what? Like, I felt, and I told you this, disappointed in myself that I wasn't bringing my best physique, because I knew I was putting on stage a 60% of what I was capable physique because of the limitations. But I was damn proud of how far I'd come, that I still worked through it, that I did what no one else would have done. I still got on that stage. I didn't pose until the night before at midnight, when everyone else is probably asleep, feet up, no fluid retention for them. I'm up trying to pose with my back, and then getting physioed in between my catwalk. So funny. So, for me, I was damn proud of that. I was overwhelmed when they announced my name as the winner, but at the same time, I knew in my heart that I'd already won it. So I just resonated that was meant to be for me, as I feel it will be this year too. No hesitation in saying that. And it's not because I'm being cocky or arrogant. It's because I know that my inner game is just, I'm so at peace, and my inner game is so strong that that's hard to beat. More than the outer game. The outer game is going to be sensational, though, thanks to you and Jordan, just saying. And then my whole team, Pay and Paolo and the guys in Australia that are with me on the ground, that see me, and Lee, man, I couldn't do what I'm doing now without them. And they've worked through the psychosomatic pain side with me. And then Jordan with the prescript, you've seen his work with my physique, just stability wise, and what you and I have been going through, just reconnecting my brain to my pattern of movement, which sounds like such a simple thing. And actually, one of my clients said this to me today. She was like, I love watching that you at your advanced level, which everyone else looks at and idolizes, still learning something. I'm like, well, hell yeah, of course.
Right.
Fuck, if I'm not, you shouldn't be being coached by me, because that's a shit coach, as far as I'm concerned. But for me, that was really nice hearing that, because it is, and you mentioned this too, it is you're putting yourself out there quite vulnerably to say, I've got dysfunction, I've got patterns of movement that aren't working right, and I need to work on it. And as a coach, and I guess as someone that's high profile, it's quite a vulnerable space to put yourself into.
Sure.
I have no hesitation in doing it though, because I'm doing something about it, and I'm just going to become stronger for it.
I did it all throughout my career. I was like, I'm not good at this stuff. I need to get better. I never said I was good at anything. I'm just better than most other people. It's depending who you're comparing yourself to. But that's incredible. So much valuable information. Best place for our listeners to find you? Social media, website, anything you want them to know about you?
So www.alliesangels.com.au is our website. Allies, Angels and Alphas is our coaching business. You can also find us on Comp Coach, Fit Angels, Allies Angels Fitness, and at my personal page, which is Alicia Gowans _WBFF Pro. You can also tune into and listen to our podcast, The Competitive Edge Fitness Uncensored. Find the old version where we had Ben on. It was a good one. And other than that, I think that's probably about it.
And I'll link to all that stuff in the show notes. You're amazing. Keep doing wonderful things and inspiring millions of men and women.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that podcast with Miss Alicia Gowans. You know, I created this podcast to help you and me live our greatest life in a body that we love. And as I said in the beginning of the show, the idea of chasing this desirable body is a very external goal. And I encourage each and every one of you to realize that building a body will never bring you happiness, joy, or fulfillment. People think that happiness will come as a result of achieving this ideal body, and it's actually, in fact, more of the opposite. If you achieve happiness and joy and fulfillment on the inside first, your body then becomes an outward expression of that. So I encourage each and every one of you to start exploring how you can bring happiness into your life on a regular basis. Plan it into your schedule. Write down a list of things that bring joy or fulfillment or happiness into your life. And ideally, it's not destructive things. It's things that you can just do that make you feel full, make you feel like your tank is full, like your heart is enriched. And then plan those things on a regular basis. So many of us are attached to this. I have to crush it. I have to work hard, and then end up either binging or doing something destructive when we've kind of gone too far over the edge. I suggest each and every one of you start to plan joy, happiness, achievement in your day every single day, whatever that means for you. So for me, that means daily meditation. That's so enriching for me. I feel so much better, so much more calm, so much more responsive rather than reactive. Planning time with my children and planning time outside just to be grateful for this amazing life and this amazing body we've been gifted. Take some time to create a gratitude practice and build that into your life. And I promise it'll be so much easier to push harder with work. It'll be so much more focused and so much more fulfilled. And do not forget to subscribe to the podcast. Head over to iTunes now, Muscle Intelligence Podcast. Share with at least one person you know and leave us a review because you love us, and your reviews and subscriptions drive the podcast so we can continue to bring you the best guests in the world. As always, live your greatest life in a body you love.
Thank you so much for tuning into Muscle Intelligence. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to share it with at least one person you know. Make sure you're subscribed so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Ben Pekulski and the producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.